Welcome back to the program. Joining me right now is Ike Chioke, who is the Group Managing Director at Afrinvest. Welcome to you, Mr. Chioke, and good to see you. A Happy New Year.
A Happy New Year to you too, Nancy.
How is work? How is everything doing?
It's, I think we are thankful, given all that's happening around the world, given all the health crisis about this coronavirus that's still with us. If you've survived 2021 and you're healthy, I think you should congratulate yourself. So we are very thankful, and we are ready to go into 2022 with energy and momentum.
Okay, let me start from these basics now of COVID.
Yeah.
I know I last spoke to you in
2020?
Yes.
Yes.
And this is the first fiscal meeting we're having like in over a year or so.
Correct.
So how do you think we've really fared with COVID-19 pandemic? Because it's still a threat, but I don't know if it's as much a threat than it was in 2020. How are you seeing this?
Well, I guess in 2020, everybody was really scared about this pandemic. There was not much knowledge and understanding about it. And so, the last kind of health crisis we had before that was Ebola. So, all sorts of imaginations of what COVID could do to you, was rampant. And remember, we had those gory images coming from Europe, Italy losing like 10,000 people every day. And it was just scary. And, everybody just took cover, went for cover. And then the economy contracted. In 2021, with the emergence of the vaccines, different vaccines available, and the fact that people can see that you can survive COVID, I think there's been more assurance that, yes, it's something that we can live with. And Nigeria has sort of shaken it off and is living with it and managing with it. Today, we have a vaccination rate of about 2.2%. It's still very low, well below the World Health Organization expectation of 40%. But that's a marked improvement from where we were in 2020, where there was no vaccine. So going into 2022, I think the expectation is that if COVID could remain like sort of malaria, or
so
could
it
remain
could become
like the
endemic.
yeah, it just becomes part of
Part
the
of
illnesses
us.
we have to worry about. And we've seen that it tackles older people with sort of endemic illnesses, and it can just come in, and then if there's another underlying illness, it can then hold on to that and makes it more challenging. But we've seen now in the more recent variant, the Omicron, it has shown to be a bit milder. It has not caused as much acute illnesses as the Delta variant, but we're learning to live with it.
Do you think that businesses have learned also to live with it? Because 2020 was very scary, like you said. Businesses shut down, a lot of remote work going on. But I'm also saying that there were positives that came with COVID in 2020. A lot of new businesses came up. We saw new startups and all of that. Do you think that businesses have been able to learn from it and perhaps have a kind of shock absorber? Because it may not be COVID tomorrow, it may be something else.
Correct.
What have businesses learned, and how have CEOs like you learned with this process?
Yeah, I mean, if I take Afrinvest as an example, we went into total lockdown around March 2020, if you recall, and worked completely, almost virtually remotely throughout until the end of the year. Coming to 2021, we kind of began to reopen gradually. And today we have, say, 20–30% of the workforce at any point in time in the office. What we have done is
so you're not back physically
no,
to work.
what we've done is to adopt remote working as a permanent structure of the firm.
Okay.
Rather than think of ourselves that, oh, you must be in the office every day to work. We also bear in mind that the head office is in Lagos. Some people commute over 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to go home. So we adopted remote working as a permanent structure of the firm. And so people can then decide that I'm going to come to work on Wednesday and Thursday of this week, and the rest of the week I'm working remotely. And it's working for us. Again, it depends on kind of business you do. We're sort of a knowledge-based business. So if you sit down with your computer and connect to the internet, you can do it in a quiet place. Now, if you're a manufacturer of milk, you must have to have the staff come in. So you've got to then adopt more sort of higher health standards, sort of a bit more sort of socially spaced workforce, and make sure people are checked periodically. And some workforces some offices, they may, test their workers every week, every 2 weeks, just to check that there's nobody carrying, any variant around and sharing it among the work staff. People just have to find what works for them. But I do think that most businesses in Nigeria have reset themselves to it. The bigger issues for us is not really COVID. If you think about the economy broadly, there are bigger issues like insecurity and foreign exchange and inflation that are bedeviling businesses in Nigeria, for example.
I'll come to that in a bit. And I like the way this conversation is going, dovetailing from how you started.
Yes.
So if we could elongate that a bit, especially around businesses.
Okay.
And we've seen what government is trying to do around mandating vaccine policy. I don't know what business people or business chiefs like you are also thinking. In some countries, no job, no jab, or no jab, no jobs.
Yes.
If you're not being vaccinated, you won't have a job. The federal government, for example, put in the policy, I think December 1, for federal workers not to access their offices if they are not vaccinated.
Correct.
I don't know how chiefs like you are looking at it. For me, I've been vaccinated and I'm not ashamed to say it.
I'm double vaccinated.
I'm triple vaccinated.
I'm waiting for my booster. I think it's coming this
I've
week.
taken my booster already.
Okay.
So for people like you and for businesses that have to open either remotely or physically, the issue of vaccine mandates, how do you see it? It's a very emotive one, though.
It's a very emotive one, and it's interesting when you delve deeply. Last year, I wanted to impose no vaccine, no physical presence in the office.
Okay.
You can continue working remotely, but you shouldn't come to the office. But working with my HR department, it became apparent that there are social and religious issues around it. Some people belong to a religious group that says, no, you can't take vaccines, not just even for COVID, even for other ailments. And so we have to learn to manage with that. But I do think that given how challenging COVID can be to the structure of an office, that it's something that needs to be implemented. I believe what we are planning to do, the way we did our first vaccines was to get the whole office together and organize for the people from Lagos Ministry of Health to come in and jab everyone at once. And then same thing happened with the second shot. And now we're coming to the booster shot. So we're trying to get as many of our staff as possible to come in and do it conveniently and efficiently. And I think that most chief executives are kind of following the same path. Because when you really look at least earlier in the system, when they started doing the vaccinations, it was not quite easy. Many of the centers were crowded, and your staff will have to wait for hours on end to get their jabs, and but now things are a bit easier to get to.
So in essence, 2020 was a very scary picture. 2021 became a little bit clearer because of the vaccines that were introduced. We're in 2022, but let's go back to 2021, and I want to hear in your own words a description of how 2021 economy was. For Nigeria, we suffered a recession in 2020.
Yeah.
We came out of it also in 2020. Yes, we came out of it the last quarter of 2020.
Yeah.
How was 2021? Did you breathe a sigh of relief?
Yeah, if you think about
January 1, 2022.
The whole of 2020, the economy contracted 1.9%. But the last 9 months to September 2021, the economy was up 3.2%. So you can see that the economy has been positive last year, and that momentum is showing across all sectors. In fact, it was driven by the non-oil sector, which was up about 4.3%, contributed by services sector. When we look at the 19 different segments of the economy, we saw that 16 of those segments were positive in 2021 out of 19, compared to just 6 in 2020 out of 19. What is still a challenge for the economy is the oil sector, which contracted in 2021, at least up to the last 9 months of September, by 8.5%. So that's an area we need to get right. And we forgot also, as an oil economy, if your oil sector is not growing, or on the other hand is contracting, then obviously it has bigger challenges for the economy and the health of the economy.
From the analysis now, what does it really say for our non-oil sector? Because the non-oil sector has been growing, and the oil sector contracting. For the non-oil sector, how do you think we can improve that? And for the oil sector, do you think that the introduction of the PIA or the signing of the PIA by Mr. President, that there's a ray of light, or that there will be a ray of light coming in from that sector, especially as we proceed this year?
Correct. But you know, you have to look at, well, you have two questions. Let's thinking about the non-oil sector. The non-oil sector is doing well, but it's constrained by other endemic issues like insecurity. And, you know, insecurity has meant that, you know, just the issue of logistics, getting people around, getting goods and services around, you know, people have a second think about it. You know, should I get on the road and drive to Maiduguri or Jos or Kaduna? These are things that you used to do without, you know, a moment hesitation. Nowadays, you then think, okay, if I must, then what's the security arrangements for it? And that's a cost factor to business. And in many cases, there's massive disruption. If you think about what insecurity is doing to our farmlands, it means that we are not able to farm, we can't harvest food, and so staple food is becoming more difficult for the average Nigerian, and it's putting cost pressure on food inflation. Those are challenges that if we can tackle, then makes the non-oil sector even more, you know, resilient and more robust. Not to say that they haven't done well in 2021, but you can see kind of, it's like trying to run a sprint and somebody's holding your shirt, so you're kind of constrained by other macro issues. When you come to the oil sector, it's great that we've signed the PIA. Indeed, it's one of the things that you said the executives did well last year. They did the PIA, they did some other positive things like InfraCorp. But the devil's always in the detail when you come to now implement the reorganization of NNPC. But it's a good thing. And, you know, well, we have to see how that works out in practice. If the bill is elegant enough, I mean, it's taken us over 2 decades to come to this point. So now we have it, let's work with it, and we'll then see how it works out in the next few months.
If we're taking a look at 2021, in your own view, how would you assess the management of 2021's economy? Of course, the economy grew. I don't want you to give me data of all this stuff because I know those data.
Yeah.
But in terms of, like you said, the devil is in the details, really. The management, the Buharinomics, let me just put it simply. Buharinomics in 2021, how far?
It's tough. I think that while we are coming out of the recovery, I mean, out of the contraction of 2020, where you had a bigger coronavirus issue constraining everything, in 2021, we're having to recover, but we're dealing with multiple hydra-headed monsters. We've got the fuel subsidy going on, which is chewing in approximately ₦1 trillion a year of scarce resources. Fuel subsidy takes more from the economy than the combined allocation to healthcare and education, and has been doing so for many years. So that's on one hand. You've got also issues like power subsidy. We've not gotten our power sector right, you know. And of course, the big elephant, there's always the FX subsidy when you look at the differential between the official rate and the power market, and that continues to widen and creep up. So those two things make it quite challenging for you to sort of direct the economy the way you want to and sort of get what you want, which is have inclusive growth all the way to the bottom of the economy. It's one thing to say that Nigeria, with a population of 200 million, has 100 million very poor people that are earning maybe $1 a day. $1 a day, at official, a power market is like 500 naira a day. But actually, 100 million, think about it, is a lot of people. 100 million is probably more than the rest of West Africa, if you think about the population. But if you actually break it in segments, within that 100 million earning 500 naira a day, it means there could easily be 25 million people that have no money at all.
Yeah.
You know, or easily 50 million people that have no money, not a single penny of income in a day, and the other 50 million are earning 1,000. And so those numbers, when you really pierce down, you see that on a daily basis, there's a lot of suffering and a lot of anguish. And you know, what you then have to do is what kind of policies can we do to make sure more of the wealth of Nigeria trickles down. And fuel subsidy is one that, you know, it's easy for the trade unions or the politicians to wax lyrical about it, but think about it. It's the rich people that benefit the most from fuel subsidy. If someone that has a house in Abuja, has a house in Lagos, has a house in his hometown, probably has 2 or 3 cars in each location, he's the one that benefits by far on fuel subsidy because he's buying it at a discounted rate. But if someone that's in a bus that's carrying 14 passengers, you know, the biggest problem for that bus is not fuel subsidy. The biggest problem is the quality of the road. Because if anything, if it hits a bump and one of the axles goes down, that's far more expensive than the cost of fuel to transport those passengers. So when we think about the implications of a fuel subsidy removal, then you have to think, how do we get some kind of rebate system down to our commercial transportation industry and road haulage industry, because that's really where you get the people at the bottom. Now, you think about the broader picture of how you manage 2021, and you don't try to deal with those areas, then it's sort of like, you know, you're dealing with it like an iceberg. You know, when an iceberg is floating, you only see 10% of it above water, and there's 90% below water. So we can sometimes be cosmetic in our effort, and we're just dealing with just the top of the problem. But again, the passage of PIA is a good signal that we're now ready, perhaps, to begin to think about how to tackle that problem more effectively.
I like that word, perhaps, because it also depends on how far the government can really take this through. Let's still stick with this fuel subsidy removal a bit, since it's an emotive one, and with what you said, there is need to take it off. It makes so much economic sense to take it off.
Correct.
But why do you think that Nigerians are not understanding it this way? That fuel subsidy is taken, in fact, at the World Bank Nigeria Development Update, which I anchored in December, the launch in December, we're told that, you know, fuel subsidy takes about so much money on, that's fuel subsidy over health,
It's
about 13,000 naira on a person, than 1,000 naira, so to speak, for fuel subsidy. And you see that is so humongous.
Yeah.
But Nigerians are not seeing it this way, because they believe that if fuel subsidy is removed, transport prices will go up.
Correct.
That will affect food prices.
Correct.
And that will bring more anguish to the people.
Correct.
So how should the government, how can they tread this?
Yeah, it's for me, when I think about it, I believe, and I look internally myself, I think the biggest challenge for the government is a social contract between the leaders and the followers. That contract has long since been broken, and the political class have not made any attempt to try to connect it back. You know, if you're the citizen and you're watching your government spend money flagrantly, going all over the world, go on they call it ESTA code. The civil servants love to go on trips because they get more on a 10-day trip than their salary for that month, for example. And if you're watching and seeing how your commonwealth is being shared amongst a handful of citizens who happen to be in government and the privilege they have, the average politician that's, once elected, watch him over 1 or 2 years, you see mansions all over the place, his businesses are thriving, and you wonder, the magic must be that he's not an elected official. You see, that social contract, that messaging tells you there's a difference between those who are in government and the rest of us. So in order to re-engage Nigeria, you must come back and connect that social contract back. It's something like if a family, your husband and your children, if all your income, you get it, and you and your husband just spend it going to parties, traveling overseas, and the kids are not going to school, they don't have decent healthcare, they don't get enough love and attention, you notice that they will actually behave strangely to you people. And that connection needs to be put back in there. When you think about Nigeria and the issues, and we have, I think, 3 main issues that we're trying to solve. There's the poverty. So how do you get inclusive growth across Nigeria? There's insecurity, which prevents businesses from expanding. I feel it. I wanted to put some of my business in the Southeast in 2021. But due to insecurity challenges, for example, before I thought it was only in the Northeast and North Central, but in Southeast, there's insecurity challenges. We couldn't expand into that region. Yeah, insecurity is another one. And then the other part of it is sort of understanding what does it mean to be a Nigerian, because people have different understandings. If you're from Sokoto, are you Nigerian? Are you as Nigerian as someone from Rivers? Is it the same belief system not I don't mean religious or
Religious.
cultural, that we have to believe that this country is ours and we all belong to it and we must fight to keep it together. And that has not really been reinforced cohesively enough to bring Nigerians together, to make them understand what is clear in black and white, that putting money on fuel subsidy is a waste of money, and we should rather put that money on healthcare and education. But in order to do that, then there has to be mutual sacrifice. I remember one time in Afrinvest when we had a massive economic recession. Yes, the global financial crisis. 2008, 2009. And we needed to cut salaries. And we needed to achieve an average of a 20% salary reduction. But in order to do that, I then realized these people at the most senior level earn the most relative to people at the junior level. So the salary reduction was done at the top, you took about 40 to 50% pay cut. In the middle, you are taking about 20 to 15% pay cut. At the bottom, it was only a 5%, just to show your part, you're contributing something. You can see now how you managed to do that. And everybody, it was announced, everybody was aware, and it was implemented equitably, straight from payroll. Some people left the firm, some people stayed behind. Today, the firm has survived, and it's much stronger than it is. And when you think about Nigeria, and think about the 2022 budget, for example, is a 17.1 trillion naira budget, but recurrent expenditure is 6.9 trillion. That's 6.9 trillion to maintain the federal civil service and structure. Remember? But that budget has already an implicit deficit of about 6.3 trillion. So we're going to have to find money to balance it. So just think about it. We're actually going to borrow more to pay the salaries and wages of the political and the civil service class and the legislature. And if I think of the population of Nigeria, I don't think all of them are more than 5 million people put together.
Yeah,
and then there's still the 195 million of us.
Yeah.
And this is a budget that is assuming there's going to be a 10.7 trillion naira revenue expectation. If we fall short of that revenue, which we have done in the past, we have not surpassed it. Then we have to go and borrow even more. And those are the dilemmas. If the same budget had 6.9 trillion for recurrent and 5.5 trillion for capital, so capital expenditure is even smaller. The expenditure they're going to put in the system that will benefit the rest of us. So some other countries will think that perhaps our recurrent expenditure should not be more than, at any point in time, it should be about 1/3 of what the capital expenditure is. So if you put capital at 5 trillion, you would then do about 1.5 of recurrent. That tells you that you really have to, obviously, to be a massive social dislocation if you want to reorganize the federal civil service system, and indeed most of the states, ministries, departments, and agencies to bring it to that kind of size. But when we talk about these numbers, we almost have to try and put them in real terms. And when you try to put them in real terms, you then come back to that question. For Nigerians to be willing to agree for a fuel subsidy removal and other subsidy removals, there are still other subsidies, the social contract needs to be reconnected.
How can that be done, and how soon can that be done? And listen, I asked the finance minister that question in December. I wonder how you're going to implement this. And she told me about the 5,000 naira allowance.
Cash transfer.
Yes, cash transfer. Then, how do you think that this government can achieve that quickly with close to 500 days or less than 500 days to go?
I know the Honorable Minister of Finance, and I have utmost respect for her, but she has a Herculean job to do. And, so sometimes as a minister, you have to do what the political masters have told you to do, But if you think about it, 5,000 naira cash transfers times how many million households? 25 million is effectively even more than the first subsidy we are talking about. If you do that on a monthly basis, multiplied by 12, you'll be doing something like I think I did the math, 2.2 trillion. We are complaining that we're spending about 1 trillion on fuel subsidy. So you jump from the frying pan into the fire. It will be much worse. Now, when I talked about fuel subsidy, I told you that it's not really a subsidy that gets to the lower income classes. No, it doesn't. If you're taking a bus from here to Lagos, your subsidy component is meaningless. But if you're driving in a convoy of 12 cars that you own, that you're the one consuming the subsidy. So the way to do it is to find a structure, and we have so many organizations. The thing I like about Nigeria, we all have associations. If you look at every segment of society, there's always some association or the other. I believe there's something called National Union of Road Transport Workers. So all the transport workers have cars that are registered. We can mine their database and say, sure, if you have a bus and you go from Abuja to Kefi, this is the subsidy we're going to pay, and this is how we're going to record it. Today, there are enough technological advancement that we can monitor that bus and know that that trip was made, and the driver gets the subsidy. That's what you need to do. There are ways to do that even for haulage vehicles. There are companies today that have all the haulage trucks on their system, and that helps to bring the transport costs down and bring the logistic costs down while allowing the fuel subsidy to go up. Those who then decide they want to own 5 cars may now decide, actually, you know what, my friend, I'm not going to drive all those cars every day. If you're coming to visit me, instead of me sending my driver to the airport to pick you, I'll tell you to take Uber or take a commercial car. And then at that point, things begin to readjust itself. So there are different ways to achieve the same effect without going into this challenge of how do you decide who is a poor household between someone living in Kaduna versus somebody living in Ekiti State. How should I actually monitor that this 5,000 naira was actually paid to this poor woman that we claim needs it, And there's issues of transparency and, equity and, so all kinds of problems will come out of it. But if that's what they've said they want to do, well, I wish them luck.
And let's see, we're already in 2022.
Yes.
We expect, according to government's plan, by June, according to what the minister told me, Minister of Finance, June 2022, but in the PIA by February 2022.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's break down some of the key assumptions in 2022 budget. It was a good thing that the president, at the end of 2021, signed the 2022 budget.
Correct.
So kudos to this administration for doing
they've
that.
been very
at least,
efficient on their budgeting
yes,
process.
the timeliness of it. So let's take a look at some of the key assumptions, and let me be specific. The oil price, for example, the FX rate,
correct,
inflation, and let's also just oppose it for the outlook of those macroeconomic fundamentals this year, especially with what we're seeing already. We're in 2022.
Yeah, the assumptions are not unreasonable. Oil price has been put at $62 per barrel. Currently, it's trading at $81 per barrel. So that's a decent assumption. Oil production is 1.8 million barrels per day. Again, reasonable.
But we didn't achieve that.
But we didn't achieve it. But at least we have the threshold to increase our production. We had challenges. The problem when you shut down some of these production facilities, bring them back on stream can be challenging. So now that we have the capacity to do, that's still going to be a problem. There's also the issue of what the cartel, OPEC Plus, needs to do, to manage the oil price, now that the world economy is moving to positive territory and you now see greater oil consumption, then you need to actually allow production levels to come up. Otherwise, the price could go through the roof and create a different problem on the upper end. Now, you think about inflation. Inflation has been coming down, trending down over the last 8 months, and the assumption this year's budget is about 13%. We're currently at about 15 or so, 15.4%. So that should average down, and that's not unreasonable. And then growth projection for the economy, the CBN, the government is looking at something like 4.2% GDP growth for the year. So again, not unreasonable. Some people will say, okay, I've seen IMF around 3.5, but if there's another shock, for example, if there's another mutation of this COVID variant,
which there's
that
a possibility,
creates a massive lockdown effect and nobody can move around, those are the things to watch out for. Or if there is a challenge with the cartel, OPEC Plus, they don't control their members, and people then start pumping aggressively, and then oil price goes down way below the benchmark. That could be a problem. But I do think that for Nigeria, we have enough capacity internally to fix our house, put it in order, particularly in this year that we can see, positive growth. And with being a pre-election year, it also creates problems for us because
and
every
I'm
time we have a
seeing
pre-election year,
I'm seeing the vibrations around.
Exactly.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah,
I guess my political colleagues will do that.
True.
Well, when it comes to, I think, 2023, I can get into the foray of it, But you've just talked about global risk which we face that may not allow us to attain some of the key assumptions. What are the internal risks facing us really? I know you mentioned insecurities. There's something else?
Yeah, there's insecurity is one. There is that's also affecting the sort of the food chain, food supply chain. There's a massive poverty in the land. How do we get that? And there's the biggest one is corruption. You know, between insecurity and corruption and poverty, we are sort of in a vicious cycle, caught in a triangle that we can't get out of. And I think that as someone from the finance and investment banking space and looking in and seeing how the political experts and they are trying to manage it, I find that there's a difficulty that they face inherently. Insecurity, poverty, and corruption are intertwined. So if I try to solve one without looking at the others, it's like trying to walk on quicksand. Have you tried walking in a muddy river before? As you're trying, each step you take is sinking deeper and deeper. So you have to then think, okay, how do I cross this river? Maybe I should bring a plank and several planks. As I'm putting them, it gives me more stability and walk across. And I think that there is a word that has been used a lot in the Nigerian commonplace that this government could consider trying to do, which is, because it's all tied to the economic, the social contract and everything, the elephant in the room is political restructuring. If they try the restructuring with objectives of saying, we're trying to do the restructuring in order to achieve greater security, greater alleviation of poverty, and control corruption, then you see now you have your objective set out for you. Because when you look at how the police work or the military, even when you look at their basic organization, you say it doesn't seem to make sense the way you organize. So you already have challenges. I continually at Afrinvest look at our business structure, how we're organized, how the marketplace is shaping up, how do we reorganize. It's a very dynamic process. But you don't take a structure that the British left for you in 1960 and you're trying to continue to force it down on a system. The population has gone up more than 10 times in 2022. So how do we do that? How do you do that in a world that is today an information age? You know, information moves at the speed of light. Just this program we're on, I'm sure people can be watching it in Alaska, you know, and, you know, tweeting about it. So those are germane issues that we need to kind of resolve. And, you know, when you think about the instruments that we're using to solve our problem, they are really not the most modern or the most advanced that we can put on the table, in my view.
From an investment banking space or from the investment space, how would you say that we fared in 2021 and moving into 2022? What kind of calls are you getting now?
Okay.
I'm not saying you should tell me specifically, but what areas or which sectors are investors gravitating to? Are investors even still interested in Nigeria, especially looking at what the Fed, the U.S. Fed, is doing? Inflation in the U.S. is skyrocketing. Everyone is crying in the United States. That would dovetail into our own country. The MPC, CBN will come up in about 2 weeks. Emefiele and his team, I don't know how they are going to navigate this year. Vis-a-vis, should they tighten or should they leave monetary policy where it is to see how the economy will still continue to grow? So it's, you know, a lot of mismatch, or perhaps, I don't know, how are you seeing this? And in the investment space, how are you all calibrating this and trying to say, let's go in now, or let's wait on the fence and see?
I think, okay, if you look at 2021, the economy was up 3.2% for the 9 months of the year. I think we'll end the year around sort of 3.5 positive territory. So that's positive. Inflation has been more controlled. It used to be around 17% at the beginning of the year. It's now trading down to 15.4%. If you look at the external reserves, we're at $35 billion in January 2020. We're at $40 billion now. So it's all positive feel. Unfortunately, the exchange rate would not be the same thing. Official, I think we started the year at 360. We're now at 410.
416, I checked this morning.
Yeah, for the
I&E window.
I&E window. So some people have even said as much as 430. So that's the reverse. for the people who are stuck in Nigeria and they have a Naira economy, it depends on which part of the sector you are. Some people have seen their businesses grow quite impressively. Like you were talking, COVID has created new opportunities. If, for example, you're in the business of, COVID testing, and you have a particular niche, maybe you're covering the Koyi market or the Asokoro and the Maitama
Would have
market.
made money.
You're making money like a gangster, so, but if you're a big farmer and you're stuck in Benue State and you've got, hectares of farmland that is, harvested, but you can't get it out because of insecurity, you can see you then have a different problem, Coming into 2022, what we've seen is that one key barometer for growth is the ability of the economy to attract foreign exchange on its own. There was once upon a time this country would attract nearly $30 billion a year in foreign inflows from Nigerians in diaspora, from investors coming to the equity markets of fixed income, or just building new businesses, as in foreign direct investment. I think FDI has sort of almost evaporated completely. We don't hear those words, and the little foreign exchange we get in from investments, I think last year was something like $2.5 billion. So paltry that Ghana is eclipsing us. That's Ghana, whose economy is probably not bigger than Lagos State. So you then see that we certainly need to do a bit more to tweak and turn the economy, and the challenges have been sort of the monsters of subsidy. If investors are coming in at a certain exchange rate and don't have confidence on what rate they're going to go out in, they'll probably stand on the fence. Yeah? If people know that you need power, electricity, but there's no guarantee on the price at which the tariff I'm going to sell the electricity at, they'll probably stand on the fence and say, why am I going to invest when someone's going to tell me what the price is, Can you imagine this program if someone's supposed to put a commercial on AIT and you guys cannot tell them this is the price of the commercial for this number of minutes, So those are serious issues that we haven't yet dealt with, and that's on the power side. And then you then have the fuel subsidy we talked about earlier, So all these are just like trying to fetch water with a basket, and people are saying, are you serious? Why don't you go and get a better bucket that at least doesn't leak as much, And there you are struggling, you're fetching water with a basket and you're wondering why there's no water in your house. Everybody can see all the holes where the water is leaking from. So going into 2022, this is a pre-election year. I think what the government has to do is think of what legacy am I going to leave behind. And in terms of that legacy, and you come back to the objective that the president talked about in 2014 when he was running, he was talking about security, I was talking about corruption, I was talking about economic growth. And here we are, 7 years later, what have we done? So how is he going to do that? And I think if he wants to do something quite remarkable in 2022, he can organize a sovereign national conference and say, everybody, let's talk about this vision of what Nigeria is about. There was one that was
organized by Goodluck Jonathan.
Yes.
And is on the shelf.
It's there. I mean, let's revisit the document if you want to, or let's look at it, but let's look at it from the point of view, how can we address insecurity? How can we address corruption? How can we ensure there's growth for everybody? And in that vein, how actually can we address the notion of what it is to be a Nigerian? So that someone from Lagos feels equally as a Nigerian as somebody from Maiduguri. And that, if we start with that kind of platform, perhaps we can find a solution.
Okay. I asked my guest yesterday this question, and let me pose it to you as we close. What is one word you use to describe perhaps 2022, your outlook for 2022? One word. That's the A part of the question. The B part of the question would be, what asset classes, especially in the capital market, do you think that investors should be watching, or people like you are watching, not even investors, or that you advise your clients? Then the third part of the question is, what do you think will boost market valuations this year? Because we saw last year, a lot of fiscal policy, monetary policy side, especially interventions going to different companies, perhaps even listed on the exchange and all of that. So one word for 2022, what do you think will boost market valuation? And perhaps free advice, what asset classes we should be looking at?
One word for 2022, I might say, it's tough to find a word. Constructive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think Nigeria has go through ups and downs, and probably more downs than ups. But I do think that Nigeria is gradually coming of age, and I think I remain constructive that we would get better, you know. And a couple of miracles need to happen. If the president were to pass that bill, if the House were, I mean, the National Assembly would send a bill on electronic transmission of results, it would create a greater and more transparent platform for elections. And that could mean more decent candidates.
Okay, so I take the word as better.
Better.
Okay,
yeah?
second question very quickly. What do you think will boost market valuations?
I think the fixed income market could remain attractive.
Okay.
In a pre-election year, the equities often suffer. We've seen that in 2014 and 2018. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of money politicking. So those in the real sector selling all sorts of gift items will make a lot of money.
So that means you've answered the third question, really, which asset classes. So we should look at the fixed income market.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chioke.
Thank you, Nancy.
That's the much we can take, and that's the much time we have. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for coming. All right, I've been speaking with Ike Chioke, who is the Group Managing Director at Afrinvest, and we've been looking at the 2021 economy as well as 2022 economic prospects. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Please join us again tomorrow. I'll be here with another guest, another topic. I'll see you tomorrow.